So welcome to our SPEDNet webinar, Strengthening Growing Brains, How to Empower All Types of Learners for Success in School and Life. We're pleased to have you joining us this evening. I'm Jennifer Bernheim. I am a board member with SPEDNet and the founder of Right to Read Advocacy, and your host for tonight's webinar. SPEDNet was created over 25 years ago as a nonprofit to educate and empower parents of students with special needs to become their child's best advocates. In addition to our webinars, presentations, and support group, we have an easily accessible website with videos of all our presentations and webinars, sorted by topic and speaker, as well as related articles and materials. It's really a great repository of previous presentations, so feel free to visit if you have topic-specific questions. We've also published an excellent interactive guide to special services, bringing knowledge to the table, how to be an effective advocate for your child. If you find our information supportive and helpful, feel free to donate to SPEDNet. We are a nonprofit, and your donations go directly to programming like this evening's. And tonight's webinar is presented in partnership with Wilton Public Schools and Newtown SPED PTA. Before I introduce our esteemed guests, I want to share a few ground rules. Please be mindful that this is an open forum and the presentation is being recorded, so we cannot guarantee confidentiality. You may not want to reveal any private information in your questions. This webinar recording will be sent out to all of you by email and posted on our website and YouTube channel. Our guests will take questions during the talk. Please type your questions into the Q&A, and also feel free to type your thoughts, notes, etc. in the chat. And there'll be some poll options as well. So a nice opportunity to be interactive tonight. Any information provided in the presentation is for general informational purposes only. It is not intended to be legal or therapeutic advice. All right, so I'm excited to introduce our speaker for this evening, Dr. Sharon Saline. She's a licensed clinical psychologist with more than 30 years experience and a top expert on ADHD, anxiety, learning differences, and mental health challenges and their impact on school and family dynamics. A magna cum laude graduate of Brown University, she received her master's degree in psychology from New College of California and her doctorate in psychology from the California School of Professional Psychology at Alliant University. Her unique perspective, a sibling of a child who wrestled with untreated ADHD, combined with decades of academic excellence and clinical experience, assists her in guiding families as they navigate from the confusing maze of diagnosis and conflict to successful interventions and connections. Dr. Saline is the author of What Your ADHD Child Wishes You Knew, Working Together to Empower Kids for Success in School and Life. And I'm excited because I just purchased it and I'm about to jump into that book. So I'm sure there's lots of great tips, and your cards. I hope you talk about your cards. Grab those as well.
I will.
Good. She's heralded as an invaluable resource. Her book is the recipient of 2 highly acclaimed awards, Best Book Awards winner by American Book Fest and the Gold Medal from Mom's Choice Awards. That feels like the official stamp of approval. What Mom.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Internationally sought after lecturer and workshop facilitator, Dr. Saline combines psychology with her love of theater to animatedly present on a variety of topics, such as understanding HD, executive functioning, teen brains. That's a whole nother topic, right? And different learners. Yeah. She is also a regular contributor to Attitude Magazine and Psychology Today, and a part-time lecturer at the Smith School for Social Work. She lives with her family in Northampton, Mass. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that beautiful introduction. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Dr. Sharon Saline. I'm a clinical psychologist, author, speaker, and consultant. I'm very excited to be with you today. I'm going to share my screen so we can get started. I will speak for a while and then I'll take some questions. I use the chat as a way for us to interact throughout the presentation, so I'm hoping we get this figured out. So let's start with this. Does this sound familiar? I'm having a really hard time making friends. I'll blank out on what people are saying for like maybe, I don't know, if they're talking a long time, maybe a minute. I worry a lot because I'm always saying the wrong thing. Niles, age 10. I'm good with my imagination. Sometimes I think of something and then I think of something else, and then I'm way away from the first thing. Kara, age 9. Not being able to focus when you want to. Really, I get distracted easily. People talking, looking at something, I would just daydream off into it. Like if I see it start snowing, I'll look at the snow. Just something that catches my attention. Tyrone, age 14. I haven't been succeeding at school and life, and I expect myself to succeed. I worry all the time about stuff. It's a constant state of my head being just above the water. So who are neurodivergent learners? I'd love it if you could put in the chat, what are some strengths that you see in your kids with ADHD, learning disabilities, twice exceptionality, level 1 autism. Hector, age 11, says, I like the energy. I can do more than one thing at a time. For neurodivergent learners, difficulties with performance are often confused with intelligence. It's tougher to access and use what you know. So they have knowledge, but they struggle to apply it to current situations. They often have intellectual skills that are not measured by traditional academic learning. And school can often be the worst domain of functioning for them, where attention, learning differences, and social issues are first noticed. These tend to be kids who have more trouble in and outside of school than other kids. And I see some strengths that you see in your kids. I see empathetic and forgiving. I'd love to know what other strengths there are. Let's focus on what some of those strengths are. It's important for us to really ground into those. Thank you. So let's launch our first poll. Can you launch the poll, please? What does your child or teen struggle with the most? So let's pick one issue, maybe it's several, but let's pick one issue that your child or teen is struggling with. Keeping friends, a general lack of interest in things or low motivation, doing homework in a timely manner, managing worries about school, activities, or family, inconsistent concentration or focus, and low self-esteem. So which of these issues are your kids struggling with? And while you're filling out the poll, I'm going to go on to my first slide. Today, I'll be talking about my unique approach, the 5 C's of ADHD approach. And this is relying on working with kids for solutions to common challenges to increase their buy-in and cooperation. We're starting from the connection and the belief that everybody dislikes the trouble spots. So the foundation is one of strength-based thinking and attentive awareness, with observing, listening to, and acknowledging what kids are saying and what they're showing. Kids want regulation, empathy, inclusion, predictability, and recognition. So this means self-control is the first C. We are going to manage our own feelings, and then we can act effectively and teach kids with ADHD to do the same. It's like the oxygen mask on a plane. You put it on yourself first as an adult, and then on your kids. Compassion. We're going to meet our kids where they are, not where we think they should be, based on their size, their age, what their cousin James does, who they are. And this lies at the heart of positive parent-child alliances. We're going to help them accept the brains that they have and try to understand what it's like to walk a day in their shoes. This means we're going to also exercise self-compassion, because it can be challenging to raise neurodivergent kids. Collaboration is the third C, working together with our children and teens and other important adults in their lives to find solutions to daily challenges. Consistency, it's not about perfection. It's about doing what you say you're going to do most of the time. So aiming for steadiness and nurturing their efforts to do their best, and also nurturing our own. So predictability and routines are very comforting for these kids, and they foster those all-important executive functioning skills. And the last C is celebration. We're going to notice and acknowledge what's working by continuously offering words and actions of encouragement, praise, and validation. We're going to try to counteract the negativity bias. Dr. Barbara Frederickson and her colleagues at the University of Pennsylvania around 2010 released a lot of research about the ideal positivity ratio. And what they found is that it should be 3 positives for every negative. Dr. John Gottman, in his research with couples, said it should be 5 positives for every negative. So somewhere in between is the magic number. I tend to use 3 because that was across all areas. And when I ask people, what is the ratio for your child? And I'm going to ask you this question as well. What do you think the ratio is? The ratio is for every 1 positive thing that they hear, how many negatives do you think they hear in the course of a day? Okay, for every 1 positive thing, how many negatives do you think they hear? And please put this in the chat.
I'd like to mention also that Jennifer and Sharon now can chat with everyone. So
Thank you. Yes, you fixed it. I see that. So Oliver says 5 plus. Anybody else? 8, says Michaela. Anyone else? 7, says Suhad. Three, 10, 10, 5 through 9. Well, I'll tell you, usually what I hear is somewhere between 10 and 30 or 40 if we're asking kids themselves, particularly teenagers who can be quite self-critical. So the ratio is not in the ideal range at all. Many kids who are neurodivergent need help nurturing a growth mindset because they lean toward fixed mindsets. And in a fixed mindset, people believe that their basic qualities can't really change. It's more of a black and white thinking, and everything's about the outcome. In a growth mindset, people pay equal, if not more, attention to the efforts and to have an understanding that intelligence and capability can grow over time with experience. This leads to, of course, improved resilience. So Jennifer, can you close the poll, please, and share the results with us?
should be up now.
Okay. So the results that we see are the number 1 is inconsistent concentration or focused. That's what your child is struggling with the most. But there's a tie for 2nd place with making and keeping friends and doing homework in a timely manner. Thank you so much. So let's get some of the facts about ADHD. ADHD is a chronic condition that is marked by persistent inattention, hyperactivity, and sometimes impulsivity that is more frequent and severe than is typically observed in children of the same age. It's a biologically based condition. It's a novelty-seeking brain. Interest fosters motivation, and these are creative, outside-the-box thinkers. ADHD affects about 10% of students in the United States. And there's a development in ADHD, often from hyperactive to inattentive over time, or combination type, because there are 3 types, hyperactive, impulsive, inattentive, and combination type. Around 55% of adults with ADHD have at least 1 child with ADHD. And if 1 child has ADHD in a family, then there's a 33% chance that another child will have it. These parents report more persistent stress than other parents and can sometimes be more negative to a neurodivergent child. The diagnosis for ADHD means that you have to have 6 out of 9 symptoms in 2 areas of functioning for more than 6 months, 5 out of or more symptoms for adolescents over the age of 17 and adults. And we make the diagnosis only after ruling out other medical, mental health, or environmental issues. ADHD rarely travels alone. And let me explain what I mean by this. So we know that about 2/3 of children with current ADHD have at least one co-occurring condition. That could be a learning disability about 70% of the time, actually. 70% of kids with ADHD have a learning disability. We see 33% to 45% in math. Reading is 33 to 45%, math is about 20 to 30%, and writing is somewhere between 57 and 65%. We also see these mental health co-occurring conditions. Behavioral or conduct problems are the most common, around 51%, although oppositional defiant disorder is about 40%. And anxiety around 33 to 34%, depression somewhere between 16 and 30%. So we see, particularly with the things that I've listed there, that ADHD rarely travels alone. And for twice exceptional kids, I want to say something about that. These are kids who basically have high performance in some cognitive areas and lower performance in others. And awareness of this difference can foster anxiety, shame, and frustration. For a lot of kids who are very bright, who have ADHD or a learning disability, they can cover, their intelligence can cover their challenges until the pressure or on the executive functioning skills or the responsibilities becomes too great, and then their disorganization or overwhelm or sort of sense of being scattered takes over. With anxiety, generally this requires an interview, a really thorough interview with kids, because it can look like ADHD a lot. And a generalized anxiety disorder increases with age. Often parental anxiety can be an indicator of anxiety for kids with ADHD. And like with depression, you have to assess for victimization, bullying, or abuse. Although can be a sort of genetic predisposition for anxiety, with depression there's more of a genetic susceptibility, and a depression can come from exposure to repeated social and emotional distress. And we know that suicidality is twice as high in adolescents with ADHD. That can be marked as anger. So if we're talking about ADHD, we do need to talk about the human brain. So everybody put your hands together like this. This is the size of your brain. It weighs about 3 pounds and has over 100 billion neurons. It reaches its full size and volume by the age of 10. It's an electrical system based on chemical reactions to communicate messages, and it develops from the bottom to the front to the top. So the back to the front. Here we have the physiological reptilian brain that has to do with heart rate and blood pressure and gross motor movements. It keeps us alive. In the middle of our brain is our emotional brain, often called the mammalian brain. This is where we have the seat of the fight, flight, or freeze, the limbic system, emotional regulation or dysregulation, the hippocampus, which has to do with memory, and also the seat of language. And then in the front, what we have is the prefrontal cortex, often what I call is the what were you thinking part of the brain, because as a parent, we're just like, oh my goodness, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? The front, as we age, we develop better and stronger connections between the regions of the brain from the back to the front. And the last region to fully connect is, sorry, I had to turn my heater on. I'm a little chilly in my room has a lot of windows. The last region to fully connect is the prefrontal cortex. Now, these frontal lobes, these prefrontal cortex, figure out what's worth paying attention to and doing. And they're really sort of coalesce around age 25 in neurotypical brains, and about a 3-year delay for people with ADHD, which affects self-awareness and judgment particularly. And we know that maturation is an uneven process, so we'll see development in organization for a few months, and then a setback in organization and development and understanding time. The adolescent brain is very sharp in terms of its ability to learn, and we know that when kids are going through puberty, that the sex hormones will stimulate the development of new neurons and facilitate a process called pruning. So parts of the brain have been found to be somewhat smaller in people with ADHD, but the most important thing that I want to say to you is about the neurotransmitters that are affected by having ADHD. So to the right of the brain, we see a neuron, and we see the dendrite and the axon, and then in that little box called synapse, one axon, and then there's another, and in between them is a gap. And in that gap is where the ferries of the brain really do their work. And those ferries are your neurotransmitters. And they're released from one neuron to another. Sometimes they spend more time in the synapse. Sometimes they're not released quickly enough. Sometimes the second neuron will come out, they will be too quickly absorbed. Having an imbalance or a lower amount of dopamine or norepinephrine is characteristic of living with ADHD. What is dopamine responsible for? It highlights what's important, rewards from activities, pleasure, and interest. ADHD brains release dopamine at a lower rate, making it more difficult to work up excitement about something unappealing. Norepinephrine is associated with sleep and alertness in the cerebellum. Reduced norepinephrine is associated with inattention, drowsiness, sleep, and trouble with focus. Of course, we cannot talk about any neurodivergence without discussing executive functioning skills. So executive functioning skills are where are the command center of the brain, residing right here in our prefrontal cortex. They connect, prioritize, and integrate cognitive functions moment by moment. Executive functioning is a term used to describe the directive capacities of the brain. So it's like, if you went to the orchestra, instead of having one conductor, you have a series of conductors. The conductor for the wind, the conductor, the wind instruments, the conductor for the percussion section. And these conductors, it's almost like they sit in a sound booth and they mix the sound so that what comes out is a beautiful product of music. Except they're mixing thoughts, feelings, and actions right here in our brain. If you do brain surgery, you won't open up and find, oh, here's where inhibition is. Oh, here's where energy is. It doesn't work that way because it has to do with these challenges often run along the dopamine and norepinephrine networks. Executive functioning skills integrate memory with what we see and think about right now. They're responsible for self-regulation. When we're stressed or tired, it hits our weakest executive functioning skills. Everybody with ADHD has significant executive functioning challenges. We also see these challenges in people with learning disabilities or twice-exceptionality. The more severe the executive functioning challenges are, the higher the likelihood there is of a learning disability. And I'm using the word disability on purpose. I prefer the word difference, but people don't get services for learning differences. They get services for learning disabilities. These executive functioning skills are inhibition, emotion, action, energy, recall, focus, goals, and self-evaluation. So let's take a minute and look at boys with ADHD. Boys are identified earlier because of often behavioral issues. About 40% about kids with ADHD have oppositional defiant disorder, and it's possible that ADHD can cause ODD. With medication and with family and cognitive behavioral therapy, ODD can go away within about 2 years. I think oppositional defiant disorder is a relationship problem because kids who are often challenged challenged with oppositionality or often have areas in their life where they get along with people just fine. And so kind of our work is to figure out what's happening in the areas where they are being aggressive and what's happening in the areas where they're not. So boys are often identified earlier with ADHD because of behavioral issues, hyperactivity, impulsivity. They can show more difficulty in managing frustration. They're less interested in fairness than winning. There is an increase in aggression towards others. They're not as concerned about the consequences of their actions. But there's a danger of missing ADHD by dismissing problematic behaviors as boys will be boys. And in an activity-oriented social world, ADHD traits like risk-taking and aggression can sometimes be viewed in a positive manner. There's also a danger of missing inattentive ADHD in boys. And I'll talk about that a little more when I talk about girls with ADHD, who tend to have inattentive ADHD more often than hyperactive impulsive. Boys relate more through shared activities, which makes difficulties in verbal expression and reading social cues less pronounced. They often like to clown around and get positive feedback for being funny, creative, or zany. So let's meet Matteo. And he's talking a little bit about what he likes about himself and what he doesn't.
What are 3 things that you really like about yourself?
Can you hear that?
I like about myself that I'm different. That I'm different now. I'm just not the same as other people. I'm like, I think more strategically. I wouldn't say I'm smarter because everyone has the like thing. But I have a lot of cool fun facts that I know about the human mind.
So you like that you're different. What's another thing that you like?
The fact that helping people is at the top of my agenda. I love helping people.
And what's the 3rd thing?
That I am much more interested in stuff that most people only get interested later in life, and that I know what I want and I know how to get it, because most people are going for the stuff they really, really like. I want to have a life that I can be proud of and that other people can be proud of.
But I'm going to pause this and stop sharing because I don't think I checked the box that says optimize video. Actually, I can't check that box. Yeah, hold on. Optimize. Okay, I just did. So this should be a little bit better.
What are 3 things that frustrate you about yourself?
My focus, my hyperactivity, and how curly my hair can be. And how good I can be at chess and how bad I can be at chess.
All right. So let's meet girls with ADHD. So girls with ADHD tend to show less severe symptoms of hyperactivity, impulsive behavior, and more symptoms of inattention. There are fewer symptoms of oppositional defiant behavior as well. But there are higher rates of peer rejection. And girls tend to have a higher rates of the internal traits of ADHD, forgetfulness, difficulty listening, problems with verbal expression and verbal control, misreading social cues. And common signs of inattentive ADHD include daydreaming, seeming anxious or sad, maybe being silly, or being shy, trouble with friendships, picking at themselves, skin, hair, or nails, and perfectionism. It can be hard for girls with ADHD because they relate primarily through verbal connections. Girls with ADHD are often sexually active earlier than their peers without it and diagnosed later. Because signs of hyperactivity look different in girls, as in excessive talking. Other signs may not be correctly interpreted. Many girls are referred. Oh, you can see my notes now too. Oh my goodness. Okay, hold on. I didn't do it right again. Thank you, Jennifer. But look at the bright side. You can see my notes, so you know I'm prepared. I'm feeling super embarrassed right now. There you go. Okay, better?
All good.
Yeah. Oh, I'm definitely feeling embarrassed. Okay. So it's hard for girls with ADHD because girls in general are socialized to relate through verbal connection. And through relationships. Women are brought up to define themselves through their relationships. And girls with ADHD struggle in their relationships. It's often easier for girls with ADHD to hang out with boys who don't have ADHD because, as I said earlier, boys are not as wrapped up in verbal expression and reading social cues. They relate more through shared activities. Sometimes we'll see girls like looking out the window, or where a boy might be tapping his foot or getting up and sitting down. And so they're not referred, or they're referred for things like anxiety or depression instead of, and not assessed for ADHD or a learning disability. Many girls with ADHD develop fewer friendships and experience higher rates of social rejection. So let's meet Anusha.
What do you wish other people knew about ADHD?
I wish they knew it was not just an attention thing. It's not just that I have trouble paying attention. Sometimes I'm really good at paying attention too, even without my medication. It's just, it's like an executive dysfunctioning thing more for me that I feel like people don't really recognize. Like, oh, like you keep forgetting to like do this thing, or like, why your dishes are still in the sink, and that's part of ADHD too. It's not just because I'm like lazy and stubborn again.
So would you describe that as just getting distracted, or being disorganized, or getting overwhelmed, or just forgetting things? How would you describe it?
Yeah, definitely. Like I get overwhelmed a lot more easily, I think. Like I feel like my capacity to do things is just smaller a lot of the time. Like when people say I have a lot on my plate, I have a lot on my plate too. It's like my plate is just smaller. I think that's what it feels like for me.
I love that. I have a lot on my plate, but I think my plate is just smaller. Can anybody relate to that? I think that, sometimes in our world today, whether you have with ADHD, for sure, people can relate to that. But also some of us just put too much on our plate anyway. I think that's just such an apt metaphor and a description for what it's like for girls with ADHD. So we know that neurodivergent kids want to do well, but struggle with how. Because as Ross Green says, doing well is better than not doing well, but they lack the self-discipline to put in the effort in advance to make things different. When kids expect failure, they've given up on themselves. Why? Because they've received a message at various points that adults have given up on them or been unable to help or understand them. So instead of asking what's wrong with this kid, our first question needs to be what's happened to them, and then what needs to change in the environment and in the person. We want to, offer compassion, because sometimes we don't realize how much effort and energy it takes to get through and for them to get through. And maybe to think for a little bit about yourself in your own life. How was it for you to get through and grow up? One of our goals really needs to be how to help them accept the brains they have and normalize that we all have strengths and challenges. We all have executive functioning strengths and challenges. Nobody is exempt. It's just that for people with ADHD, those challenges tend to be more intense and more numerous than for people who don't have ADHD. So how are we going to help them accept their brains? We're going to be transparent. No one wants to have a disorder. And the concept is often too foreign for most younger kids. Older kids will use the language, but it's still far from their experience. So what we want to do is create an organic name that speaks to their experience. I've heard chatty brain, foggy brain, dreamy brain, bullet brain, fast brain, any of those. So when we can help kids use a term to describe their brain as it is in their life, forgetful brain, then we're actually assisting them in accepting themselves. Nobody wants to have a disorder. If you want to have a disorder, could you put in the chat that you'd like to have a disorder? Because I would really like to meet you. So sometimes it helps if you yourself have ADHD or had a learning challenge, or perhaps were twice exceptional or on level 1 autism. Put that in your conversation in your family. Your kids look up to you. They want you to be proud of them. And when they see that they're different and they're struggling, they feel alone. So maybe help them find some famous people who have ADHD that they also could look up to. We want to emphasize biology. ADHD is a biologically based condition. The inheritance rate is over 50%. So it runs in families. Sometimes it can occur because of issues related to birth or prenatal exposure to drugs or something like that. So, but most of the time it's genetic. Of course, we must talk about motivation if we're talking about ways to strengthen growing brains. So motivation, why you do something, is composed of these executive functioning skills: initiation, getting started on something, often without direction and excessive reminding. You're motivated to begin a task. Time management, doing things on time and meeting deadlines, correctly estimating how long something will take, and avoiding procrastination. Organization and prioritizing, what you do with your stuff and deciding what's most important to make a plan. Sustained attention, managing your attention and resisting distractions when faced with a task. Goal-oriented persistence, setting a goal, staying focused on it, and being able to return to it after an interruption. And then, of course, focus, the spotlight of your attention. I know it's so corny, but literally I do this with my clients. I'm like, where is the spotlight of your attention directed? Because it does focus, there's different types of focus: selecting, monitoring, shifting, and of course, hyperfocus. So let's launch the second poll, please, Jennifer, or Allie. What is the second poll? What seems to interfere with your child or teen's ability to start or stay motivated? Too much interest in screens, limited attention span, boredom, organizational challenges, easily overwhelmed, stress, and anxiety. I'm going to keep going and come back. So how do we motivate kids to do the tough stuff? Well, this is a good question, because things have to be engaging. for them to start and stick with them. And there are two types of motivation that are both driven by interest, because interest stimulates motivation. Extrinsic, which refers to an outside request or a responsibility that depends on achieving a goal. You turn in your permission form for the field trip by Friday, or you can't go on Monday. Intrinsic motivation means striving towards a goal for personal satisfaction or accomplishment. You attempt to run for 3 miles instead of 2. You make the next level on a computer game. When there's no clear immediate satisfaction or benefit, people with ADHD struggle to do a task. The external incentive, the reward, encourages them until the satisfaction of doing it, that internal reward system, coalesces in the late teens or early 20s. So this means we have to put have-tos before want-tos. And the have-tos and the want-tos are part of a collaborative process, right? We're going to choose incentives that matter. What does your child love to do? No activity is too unimportant to consider. And what happens a lot of times, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is that screens are considered a given, and then we can't use them as a reward. So whether it's additional time playing outside, using electronics, or going out for a special ice cream, or playing a special game with you, or working on a project, these can all be privileges. Spending time with you is a privilege, is also an incentive. So let's see the result from the polls, please. Okay, so what interferes with motivation? Too much interest in screens is tied with being easily overwhelmed. Second place, organizational challenges. And third place, a limited attention span. Thank you. So easily overwhelmed. So screen time in my book is a privilege. It's not an entitlement. And so we want to create a collaborative plan. So we want to have some of their say about when, where, and how screen time occurs. Inappropriate use of screens, texting, online bullying, visiting inappropriate sites indicate a lack of readiness for screen privileges. So you as a parent have to decide how much screen time, not for school, you would like your child or teen to have daily. Let's say, for the sake of conversation, it's 2 hours. So they get time to do schoolwork, and then they can have 2 hours of free screen time. What you're going to tell them is 1.5 hours. Why? Because the second half hour is an earned privilege. So you get your 1.5 hours. How you ease off of that baseline, that's the baseline. How you ease off of that would determine if you get that bonus time of 30 minutes, or you can also attach bonus time to the completion of chores, the lack of yelling at you, finishing a particular project that they've been working on, any desired behavior. But you need to write your plan down and post it in a public place like the kitchen. We want to notice and validate cooperation, and expect that we're going to have to adjust our plans and tactics to change those plans. So we want to have a weekly family meeting where we talk about things like this. Your child may say, well, I'm thinking about, you may say, I'm thinking about 1.5 hours of free screen time, non-school screen time. And your child will say, oh my God, that's not enough. Oh, that's just horrible. I need 3 hours. And you'll say, okay, well, we can meet at 1 hour and 45 minutes, or maybe you'll go to 2. It's up to you, but you want to give them a little something. So you might want to keep your initial offer kind of low and see where they end up. I do believe that it's beneficial as much as possible for screens to stay out of bedrooms at night. I mean, I have a 12-year-old in my practice who holds his phone when he goes to sleep. He needs to have his phone there at all times. I have a 15-year-old who does not get to have his phone, but was trying to argue for why he should have his phone with his parents because he might need to call them in the middle of the night. And his parents started laughing aloud. We're down the hall, you know, for many years before you had a phone, you called and reached us. So we really want to kind of think about that, and making some kind of contract with non-cooperation clauses can be very useful. So let's look at some strategies for improving executive functioning skills. Impulse and emotional control. Our goal is to slow things down. So we want to predict and plan for triggers instead of being surprised every time they happen. So what's going to happen when people start to activate or accelerate what's going on? In a calm moment, try to name what sets you or your child off. Have them try to name it. Talk about and ask questions about body-based signals that let them know that things are awry, and write these down. Call a stop in the action. Maybe use a body signal like this to let them know. And then we want to have a pause. So this stop means taking a time apart. What are acceptable activities for that time apart, and for how long? Younger children, it's much shorter, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, and they may want to be around you. They may want you to read them a story or do some coloring or something, which is probably not something you might want to do, but they're struggling. And so that is a priority, because a lot of kids aren't good at self-soothing if they don't have their phone. Their phone or their computer is how they self-soothe. So what we want to do instead is to make a list of things that help you slow down. Some of my clients have gone to the dollar store, and we've created a calm me down box with activities that only come out during these stop moments. Sometimes pets can be very soothing to be around, music. You want to talk about when, where, and how. Remember that it takes 15 to 20 minutes for a nervous system to recalibrate from an acute stress reaction, i.e. a freak out, based on anger or fear. And sometimes you have 15 to 20 minutes and sometimes you don't. So the thing is, really 20 minutes, but I'm saying 15 to try to help you all out here. So what we want to do is how we're going to call for a timeout. What's the activity we're going to do to help settle ourselves down? And then we come back together for a think. We talk about, you know, if they have any comments about what they would have liked to have done, or if they have any comments about what they think would be the next right thing to do. This is actually better for moving forward. Sometimes kids might want to say, well, I wish this hadn't happened, or I wish I hadn't done that. That's fine. But we really want to get them thinking about what is the next right thing to do, because we don't want to reactivate them. And then we do that next right thing, because we talk about it too, and that becomes ACT. And then there's just living in the action, which is recovering. We're just living in the action, we're moving forward, and then sometime later, 2 hours that evening, maybe the next day, is when we can talk about what happened and what we would like to do differently next time to try to avoid that. Statements to use during the think session would be, I hear, I noticed, tell me more, I'm listening. Okay. Working memory. So working memory is a cool skill. It's more unconscious, which means it's harder to learn. It's those hot skills that are easier to teach, like impulse control, emotional control, planning, prioritizing, organizing, etc., initiation. So with working memory, what we want to try to do is write things down. Many kids who are neurodivergent benefit from visual cues. What are the visual cues that you're going to be using to help your kids? And to use the rule of 3 when you give a direction, and to keep those directions very simple with no and in the directions. The rule of 3 is you make eye contact with your child. If they're uncomfortable looking at your eyes, they can look right here. You state the direction. They state the direction back twice. So 1, you make contact, 2, you state the direction. 3, they repeat the direction twice. This helps things go into the working memory and down the memory line. We can also use Post-its and texts for reminders. The benefits of technology are many, and alerts and alarms can also be helpful. Initiation, getting started. So we want to work with our children's innate desire for mastery and independence. And this means that we have to break things down, because when kids procrastinate, it means that the task feels too big and not achievable. So no size is too small. So we want to notice and reward their efforting and successes with specific feedback or praise. I liked how you set the table. Thank you. I liked how you put your lunchbox on the counter the way we agreed to, so that they know that they're on the right track. Have a daily guideline of what to do. Sometimes people with ADHD really feel like they need a fire under them. Marcello, age 15, says, "I'm the best procrastinator ever. I push everything off till the last minute. If I have an essay due Friday, I'll do it Thursday night, 2 o'clock in the morning. Just lazy, kind of. I work better under pressure because it puts the heat under me to do it. My dad says, hey, don't feel bad about the procrastination thing. Your mom and I do the same thing." So we want to keep things interesting and playful. Play, interest, novelty improves cooperation and then produces happiness. Pinch. There are 3 types of procrastination. Procrastination is directly related to anxiety. It can be debilitating and kids can't start or finish things. Most procrastinators rarely spend their time doing nothing. Instead, they're great at doing other things: sharpening pencils, picking the right music to listen to, tidying up the workspace. So what we see with these 3 types of procrastination is perfectionism. Kids want something to be just a certain way, and if it can't be that way, they'll give up. They'll either give up before they start because they don't think they can get it that perfect way, or they'll be working on it and then they can't turn it in because it's not exactly right. They may avoid something unpleasant and also give up. They may think they failed before at something similar, so why will this time be any different? The task looks like Mount Everest. There's no idea where to start, no idea. I don't see a finish. I don't see a trailhead. I don't see a marker. I don't see a path. I don't have a guide. I don't know what to do. I'm just pulling out. And then the 3rd type of procrastination is productive, where people keep themselves busy doing something else and giving up on the big task. So they'll clean their room instead of actually, working on that history paper that they have. Or they might pick up all their toys instead of doing their math assignment. So they're doing things that need to be accomplished, but they're less urgent than the task they are avoiding. So it's a delay tactic that makes you feel somewhat better. So I'm curious if you could put in the chat, what type of procrastinator are you? I'm sometimes a productive procrastinator with a splash of perfectionism thrown in. Anybody else? What type of procrastinator are you? Let's see, Brenda Lynn, all 3. Great. Anybody else? Let's do a little sharing here. Here's something that I want to say is Jasmine, age 12, says, yeah, sometimes I have a fit if things aren't right. I want to do everything right. Like with the trumpet, I want it to sound good, really good, but it gets too hard. I like to play rock songs, but those are harder. I'll try, I'll quit, I'll try again, get more annoyed, and then I give up. Time management is a hot skill like initiation. So these are all conscious skills, and we can improve time awareness using analog clocks. The ADHD brain is a now, not now brain, and it's hard to estimate time because many kids don't feel time. That's why things like the time timer, I have no stock in this company, but I want to say it's a great thing, because when you turn it like this is what 35 minutes looks like, and then it goes like this. Whoops, hello. It goes this way, and then it makes this really unpleasant noise when the time is up, but you can see time disappear. And so the ability to plan time increases with age. We can use the Pomodoro method, which is something you can find online. It's called the tomato timer. You work for 25 minutes, you take a little break, you work another point. And we also want to teach them backwards design, which is I have to be ready for school, to leave for school at 7:45. I need 10 minutes to eat my breakfast. That's 7:35. I need 15 minutes to get dressed and brush my teeth. That, you know, and you keep subtracting until you figure out, oh, I need to get up by 6:45. Okay, this is something that is hard for kids to do. Routines are really helpful for improving time management as well. Organization and prioritizing, these work with time and they influence each other. And one of the things that we want to think about when we're thinking about organization and improving organization are making ordered lists to guide kids through the day and through their responsibilities, to refer them to the list rather than you being their reminder machine. So you have a list of things to do on the refrigerator, and you know, this is what we do in the morning and this is what we do after school. It can be a whiteboard, and they can earn points for their bonus screen time by doing, you know, the things that they need to do without an argument or in a timely fashion. We want to think about what kinds of organizational systems make sense for kids. Colors, alphabetical, numerical, and then work with those. One of the challenges with prioritizing is that many people with ADHD, kids and adults alike, can do a brain dump, but they can't order things. Everything seems equally important. And it's hard to set up a strategy for approaching homework or other tasks with the best order. So we want to assist them in setting up an understanding of, oh, what urgent is something that's right in front of your nose that is important and needs to be done right away. And what's important is something that has a value. So urgent is a time-related issue and importance is a value-related issue. And we can expect to teach our kids these skills, time, organization, and prioritizing and planning over and over and over again. These are the hardest things to learn, and they're so important. Sustained attention and goal-directed persistence. Now, how do we help kids sustain their attention? Well, we're going to put away the distractions. We're going to have all the school stuff on Google, and we're going to have all the fun stuff on Safari, so it's harder to switch back and forth. We're going to set up work periods. How long can your kids concentrate before they need a break? You have some information about this. Their teachers may have some information about this. They may have some information about this. So if we're asking a child who has an attention span of 15 minutes to sit and do homework for 30 minutes, it's not going to work very well. They might need to work for 15, do a 2-minute body break, get a drink of water, and then work for another 15. So we want to think about what are realistic timed work periods. And also, what is the order of the work? So for example, some people like to do something easy and then warm up and then do something hard, and then finish with a medium. Some people like to do something medium and then the easy thing and then finish with the hard. Some people like to eat the frog first and do the hard thing. So if you could write in the chat, what do you like to do? Easy, medium, hard? What's the order of the things that you like, the way that you like to work? This is important information for you, and it's important to know what it is for your kids, because your kids may very much not want to do the hard thing first, that they prefer the warm-up, or they want to eat that frog and do it first. So we want to find out for them what things are frogs, what things are easy, and what's the order that they like to work, and then set that up. apply incentives, and for us to remember that distraction online is a huge barrier because we socialize, we play, we learn, and communicate all from the same screen. So we can use apps to block access to certain sites. There's the Freedom app, Rescue Time, Brain Focus, Stay on Task. We can turn off notifications, and we should for non-school apps. Hide certain apps in folders so they're not as easily accessible, and use different browsers for fun and work stuff. In terms of building skills for goal-oriented persistence, we want to collaborate on goals and make them within reach. When kids who are neurodivergent feel like the goal is impossible to reach, they're not going to try. So we want them to have some feelings of success about it. Talk about how and when you will offer neutral cues to redirect. What are some obstacles that might get in the way? Encourage efforting. You know, efforting is a full body experience of trying. Trying, you can sort of, you know, toss it off a little bit, but efforting is your full body is engaged in working on something. Identify what matters. One thing, one hope. And this will help you set a goal together with your children. And maybe you have two sets of expectations. One is based on things they enjoy that are easy for them and compelling, and the other would be based on things that are harder for them and they do not enjoy. Self-evaluation and metacognition is the last executive functioning skill to coalesce in the mid to late 20s. Metacognition is the ability to think about your thinking and to reflect on yourself. So we want to develop this over the course of a child's life by asking open-ended questions that foster self-reflection, to use body sensations to increase self-awareness, and to reframe self-evaluation from good and bad to working or not working. That's really important because a lot of kids who are neurodivergent, particularly those with ADHD, are very concrete thinkers. Something's good or something's bad. They're good or they're bad. Check in with them on a regular basis and look around for cues, help our kids look around for cues to make a positive choice. Check your math backwards. Read your essays out loud to yourself. These are all things that help us get a sense of how we're doing. So let's do the last poll. If you could launch the last poll, that would be great. What gets in the way of successful collaborations in your family? A pushback, disagreement, burnout, negativity, hopelessness, a lack of a positive connection, or anxiety and depression. What gets in the way of successful collaborations in your family? I don't think it would be a useful webinar if we don't talk a little bit about strategies for dealing with lying, avoidance, and pushback. So instead of dealing with guilt or shame directly, many neurodivergent kids, particularly those who have oppositional defiant disorder, will make up excuses or deny their actions, hoping that you'll believe what they say. There's a kind of magical thinking that's involved. If I wish I hadn't said it or pretend that I didn't, then maybe it never happened. Our job is to become a lie detective. Honesty is consistent. Lies shift and change. Rehearsed stories are usually false. So observe the facial and bodily expressions. Honesty looks relaxed and open with direct eye contact. And this gets harder to do as your kids mature. My second child, they were good. They were a very good liar. Most of the time I could catch it, but sometimes they would like look at me in the eye and tell me an absolute falsehood. And I was like, okay, you know, I would say, okay. And then I would find out in a day or two, like that was a total lie. And then of course they would, you know, have consequence for that, a natural or logical consequence. Usually it was a logical consequence for lying, because I'm not big on lying. So you want to set up these consequences in advance and collaborate on them. What's interesting is that kids often will create harsher consequences for themselves than you'll create. And logical consequences are consequences that are related to the act that they did. So if you drive my car when I am away for the weekend and I tell you not to, and you dent the fender, then the privilege of driving my car will be rescinded, as well as you will be helping to pay for the repair to my fender and come with me while I get the estimates, just to make it more fun, right? So it is important to understand that we want to encourage accountability, but we don't want to risk, danger because of that. So in my house and in many houses of people I work with, there is an agreement. You can call me anytime to pick you up at midnight, wherever you are, no questions asked, and then we'll discuss it the next day. And I have witnessed many families doing this, and have lived it myself, where kids, I pick kids up, have picked some when they were younger, and there might have been some drinking involved, and they immediately wanted to know what the consequence was. And I was like, we're not talking about it for 24 hours, because their brain was still quite inebriated and I needed to calm down. So talk about what a real apologies look like and what it means to make amends. And as adults, practice honesty and owning your own stuff. We can see avoidance that can be part of lying, but also related to feeling incapable. And we want to remember that shame and rage often fuel these behaviors. We don't want to address problem behaviors in the moment. We want to give them time and give ourselves time to think about it. We also might want to consider a take back of the day policy in your family, that everybody has one thing that they can say and take back. And this allows kids to develop that metacognitive ability, that self-evaluation. I wish I hadn't said that. That's my take back. It doesn't always work as well when we as a parent say to our kids, would you like that to be your take back of the day? I have said that. I have to say I'm guilty of that. Remember that shame says you're a bad person for what you did. Guilt says you did something bad, but you're still a good person. And so what we see with a lot of kids with ADHD is they often spiral into shame and rage about extreme anger over things that they can't control, or a sense that they've been betrayed, or maybe even traumatized from growing up and as being neurodivergent, bullied, or the sum of the 1,000 little paper cuts of difficulties that are encountered. So could you share the results for the last poll, please, Jennifer? What gets in the way? Pushback. So I'm glad we talked about that. Personal burnout or negativity. Yes. And disagreement and lack of connection. All right. Thank you. So I want to say something about about burnout. So burnout or personal burnout or negativity, yours or theirs. So stress is an issue of too much, and burnout is an issue of too little. And so what happens is, after many stressors and tolerating a lot of stress, people start to burn out. They can't really deal with things. They need a break. So when we're putting the 5 C's into action in your house, you're going to manage yourself first and practice self-compassion. If you're starting to feel dysregulated, go to the bathroom, close the door, lock it if you need to, wash your hands, splash water on your face. Whatever's happening on the other side will still be waiting for you when you come out, but you'll feel a little bit better. Use this 5 C's approach. Pick one behavior that you would like your child to change. One, because how many things can people change at one time? Really one. So discuss the current challenges that they're experiencing, your perception of things that aren't working, their perception of things that aren't working, and then pick one of those things, because they can be related. You don't like rushing in the morning, and your child doesn't like you yelling at them in the morning. That's the same, that's 2 sides of the same coin. So we want to make sure that we work together on the plan. When kids have buy-in, they're 100% more likely to participate, particularly if there's an incentive involved that they like. We're looking for consistent efforts and to support their efforts and redirect them when necessary and refer back to that plan that you have about anything, really. Expect to keep scaffolding in place longer than you think. And celebrate accomplishments towards achieving a goal, even if it's not fully realized, because they're on their way. And we want to encourage that. And then talk about things at a weekly meeting. One thing kids cannot stand is how their parents talk about a problem or an issue day after day after day in the course of a week. Basically, you should have one day where you sit down and you get to talk about it, or two mornings or something, or 2 days, but that are short. But every day they start to stop listening. It's like the teacher on Charlie Brown. They hear you as wah, 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 wah. So we want to use validation and curiosity and to improve in motivation by using incentives. Routines build executive functioning skills and confidence. Predictability is comforting. Routines foster those all-important executive functioning skills that these kids really need. They also foster cause and effect learning and rely on efforting. Create routines you can keep track of. If you cannot keep track of the routine or you cannot keep track of what the consequence is, it's not going to work. So what support do you need to be able to do that? Now, you can't stick with a plan 100% of the time. Sometimes there are exceptions. You make dinner, they get to have a half hour of TV. You drop a glass, you have to clean up the glass. That's going to delay dinner, and maybe they get an extra 15 minutes of television. Okay, that's an exception, and you want to make sure you let them know that it's not the new normal, right? Set realistic goals and maintain supports for what's going well. And, you can pull a little bit back on those and keep support for what needs more assistance. It's really important not to compare kids to their siblings, to their cousins, to their neighbors, other neurotypical kids. And to use a scientific philosophy, use experiments to try something new and see what happens. That curiosity, we're going to wonder about something instead of worrying about it. This helps shift the mentality of your children and teens from being certain that something's not going to work out to opening the possibility that it could. So what are the takeaways from this evening? Scaffolding isn't about making excuses. It's about facilitating learning and making adjustments for executive functioning weaknesses. There are things that some kids can do and are already within reach. That's great. There are some that they need more support, that 50-50. You're going to spend a lot of time there. And the things they basically cannot do, and maybe occasionally 5% of the time they surprise you, we're not going to really work on those because we want to stay in the 50% and the 95% that they can do it on their own in those areas. And when something is more regularly being achieved and accomplished, then you might be able to pick something from that top shelf, but not in the beginning. Executive functioning skills need to be taught and laid out clearly. Do more of what works while slowly focusing on one area of improvement at a time. Model adaptation and flexibility yourself. Ignore some of the adolescent pushback. It's part of being a teenager. It's their job. Put on your Teflon suit and keep your sense of humor. I used to say, fresh is for vegetables. Or once I was wearing a sweater and my second child was like, your sweater looks like a really bad spider's web. And I was like, woo, I'm the Black Widow, watch out. Of course, like, oh, you're so corny. But I'm trying to be as playful as I can. Remember that teens in particular are interested in the process of problem solving, not just the solution. And that these are kids who have been raised to negotiate for power as they're forging their identity. So you get to give them a little bit of space to negotiate within a bigger square where you're kind of still running the show. And as they mature, they can have a little bit and a little bit and a little bit more room. Part of forming in your identity is being able to advocate for yourself. How are kids going to advocate for themselves? How are we going to teach them how to ask for what they need? Janice, age 18, says, when I was younger in 9th grade, I didn't want any help. I wanted to deal with things on my own. I was a cocky kid. But now I know that even though you're independent, you need help sometimes. You can't always do it alone. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to put right here. Oops, do I still have it? Hold on. It went away. This downloadable, which you can also use to scan. I'm going to try to drop that into into the I'm going to try to drop that into the chat right now. I thought I had done that, but it wasn't copying. So let me see if I can do that now. There you go. So this is my gift to you based on the things that I've covered in this webinar. And now I'm ready for questions. I see Barbara has a comment. I'll just read it.
Yes, I know. I saw the comments pop up.
Love the presentation. Some of the biggest problems. Thank you, everybody. Some of the biggest problems. Hello. We have encountered with addressing our ADHD child's needs deals with the lack of education of teachers. I wish psychologists could more broadly target educating teachers. Wherever you are, invite me to your school district. I love educating teachers. I do a lot of it. I think it's really important. I could not agree more. Your child struggled with written homework in grades K to 3. Recess was limited and non-existent in middle and high school. It's hard not to have a break. Losing recess for not completing homework makes it worse. School staff respond better to professionals and parents. I know sadly that's true. And I do want to say that I often do training for educators and community workshops. So invite me and I'll come. Let's see. Thank you, Brandolyn. You're welcome, Sarah. Thank you. Is anyone else having trouble with the link? So the link does the link work in here, right here? Does that work? Let me know if the link in the chat works. No. Okay. So
we can send it out with the video.
What? You'll send it out afterwards.
Yeah,
That's
no problem.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm
no
sorry about
problem.
that. Let me see if there's a different one I can send right now. Hold on. I'm not sure
If
why that
anyone has
happened.
any questions, they can place them in the chat or in the Q&A. Whatever is easiest. What if your child denies the problem completely? Okay.
How old is your child? And how are you talking about the problem? Because denial is not just a river in Egypt. And I'm sure your child is not one. So how old is your child? You know, teenagers may deny things partially because they don't want to accept this part of themselves, partially because they often because they're ashamed. They just want to be like everybody else. So if we can focus on the behaviors that we're seeing rather than the label of the problem, that's better. So I see you throwing your book on the floor. I see you pushing your sister. These kinds of actions are indicating that something's not right. Something's off. He's 17, attempting to collaborate, but saying no problem to work on. Okay, well, again, I would ask him, what is his problem with you? and then look on the underbelly of that, because probably a problem that he has with you is related to a problem you have with him. And again, if he's saying there's no problems, but there are actually issues that are arising, you have every right to kind of point those out, because you're his parent. You want him to be okay. It's common that the older that kids get, the more they deny it and they don't want any help, but they're also struggling and sometimes, getting in their own way in the process. Chris, how do you handle negative self-talk? E.g., I'm not a good person, I'm not a good reader. This is a great question, Chris. I think that we have parts of ourselves that are very critical. I call them the ogre, the inner ogre. And then we have parts of ourselves that are our inner allies, maybe like a Jedi Knight. And each of these has a voice. And so when the ogre is out, it's an indication that a child is feeling overwhelmed, can't kind of perform or grasp a situation in the way that they would like, doesn't feel like they have access to their resources. And so we want to help the inner ally, the Jedi, learn how to talk back to the inner ogre, and to say, you know what, I'm nervous about something. I'm feeling insecure about this. I don't know if I can do it, but it doesn't mean I'm a bad person. Again, it's that reframing from good and bad to something else. You're welcome.
Great.
Any other questions?
Would you mind discussing your cards that go with the book?
Yes, of course. Let me get them.
Great.
So this is my card deck. It looks like this.
Mhm.
It's the 5 C's in card form. And there are 5 suits. So there's the self-control suit, the compassion suit, the consistency suit. Each card has a quote, and a solution. So here's one. This is from Collaboration. Stop procrastinating, break the task down. Sophia, age 16. I don't love doing my laundry and would rather do anything else. I put it off until my laundry pile is crazy and I have nothing to wear. Then it's a much bigger chore than if I had done it sooner. So the challenge, when the size of the task seems overwhelming, it's hard to know where to begin and easier to procrastinate starting it. The tool, help your child break down tasks into small enough pieces that seem doable. If they can't get started on something, make it smaller. Ask them to describe which things pile up and what makes that happen. Set up an action plan that fits their attention span and their capabilities.
Mhm.
So these cards are a great way to talk about various things in a different form. You can work through the deck, do a 1 card a week for a family. You can pick a card randomly and work on it. It's just a nice way to communicate information that's different than in a book, right?
Mhm. Yeah, excellent idea. My kiddos are enjoying going through them.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, next question, please.
There's one in the chat here. Transitions with school subjects and activities at home are hard. My son will melt down or freeze. What is a good way to help him in moments like these? He is 13.
Okay, I am just going to try to copy this into the chat and see, can anyone let me know if this one works? Is that the same one? Let me see if it works.
No problem. Let's see. I'll check that out while you answer that
It's
one.
not working. I'm very sorry. I will get this fixed. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Okay, so transitions with school subjects or activities at home are hard. My son
Mhm.
will melt down or freeze. What is a good way to help him in moments like this? He is 13. That's a great question. So transitions are hard for lots of kids with ADHD. it partially is, it's because the shift flexibility executive functioning skill is a little bit slower to make the changes that are needed, or to sort of metabolize what's happened. And so what kids experience is meltdown, or that, like you're saying, or freezing. So they're overwhelmed. They can't access resources, and they are very frustrated. And so what we want to do is to give space in moments like this. We give warnings for transitions. We let them know when they're coming up. And we might want to talk in our family meeting about how to make transitions more comfortable. Like, do you need more time? Do you need more, when we're going through something, do you need more advance warning? That would be useful for us to know.
Excellent. And then can we also just circle back to, I think it was the 5th C on celebration. Could you give more examples there?
Yeah, it's not about making cupcakes because your child decided to clean up their room
Right.
with you. Although making cupcakes together because you've cleaned up the room together would be a nice together project.
Mhm.
We're not giving you a candy bar because you cleared your plate. It's really about specific praise, ways of noticing what they're doing, how they're cooperating, and your appreciation of that, your gratitude of that. So that's really what celebration is. It's acknowledgement, it's validation, it's encouragement, it's all of those things.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. I don't see any further questions. And
Pavel wrote something.
oh,
My
there we go.
son
Thank you.
has a problem with reading and writing at school. That is his non-preferable task. What would be helpful to do in the classroom to help him with his struggle? I would say break the tasks down. Does he have an IEP or a 504? Is he getting adequate academic support? And if he's not, why not? Because if he has problems with reading and writing, he has an IEP. Okay, so who is helping him in those moments when he has his non-preferable tasks? Is there an aide in the classroom? What is the intervention? And if the intervention isn't working, what about talking with him about what he thinks might help him? I
Mhm.
think that's really something that we forget to do a lot with elementary school age kids. Like, we don't ask them what they think would help them. And, it could be that 90% of their response is useful and 10% isn't, or it could be that 10% of their response is useful and 90% isn't. Either way, we're asking them, and that's important.
Mhm.
Well, then again, it's a question of how long he can focus on something he doesn't enjoy, and he might need less time. He might need to focus for shorter periods of time because of his frustration. His window of tolerance, his frustration tolerance is very small. So we want to expand it, and we're going to expand that by having a chunk, taking a break, having a chunk, taking a break, and things like that.
Great. Thank you. And that probably circles back to having an IEP with, accommodations for ADHD that typically aren't always followed right within the classroom.
Yeah.
Or when you move to the high school level, then you have so many teachers who also need to follow those accommodations for students, which I've seen can be challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, puts
true.
a lot on the student. Okay, good. Well, thank you so much for joining
Thank
us
you.
tonight.
Thank you. Really
Lots
appreciate
learned,
it.
and I took several notes. Can't wait to try out a few new things.
Great. It's
Yeah.
lovely to meet you. It's lovely to be part of this community. I'm not sure what's happening with the downloadables, my website, so I'll get back to you as soon as possible.
No worries. Oh, sorry, one more. Is there advice on how to generate conversations of what your child thinks may help them? Okay. We get a lot of him saying,
Well,
I don't know.
Right. So we don't want to ask why,
Mhm.
how,
Mhm.
what, where, when. These are the types of things, like, when have you gotten some help? I know it's hard to think of a time. That's going to be a tough one. But how does your teacher m- uh, help you figure out what to do in class? when do you notice that you're getting work done? Things like this. And really to try to narrow down, I don't know, to observation. Like we're just gonna zoom out and see, pretend like if I was watching you in your classroom, what would I see? That can be
Great.
helpful, or to ask the teacher, other adults, what they can do to help.
Mhm. Good.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We hope to see
Yes.
you again soon.
Thank you too. Bye.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure.